All
Okay,
right, got it. Yep.
nice. Thank you, Eugene. All right, let's just get started. Okay, so hello guys. Welcome to GDSC's workshop on our introduction to JavaScript and React. We kind of put this together for those of you who are kind of interested in web development, but don't really know where to start, or maybe you're having trouble grasping some of the core concepts, or you just kind of want to learn something new. I can definitely vouch for the effectiveness of JavaScript and React. If you're looking for something to build to build a really cool project during hackathons, since I personally use this to great success. And so, yeah. Coming into this workshop, we kind of expect you guys to have some basic idea of the concepts for programming, like what a variable is, what a function is, and what an array is. So as long as you took CS 101, you should be okay. And if you're familiar with a programming language already, that's great. Most of them are going to be the same anyways, so JavaScript should be really simple to pick up. And yeah, for this project, Eugene is going to be doing the JavaScript side. He's going to walk us through some of the core concepts, what kind of differentiates and makes JavaScript sort of unique. And I'll be handling the React side of things after he finishes explaining those core concepts. And I'll do a little bit of live coding because I think web development is really best shown when it's live. So yeah, I guess we'll start with introductions. So my name is Kyle. I'm currently the tech lead here at GDSC. I organize the technical workshops, so stuff like this. And I really enjoy full stack development. I've been working with React for many years now, and I'm at that level where I'm comfortable enough to actually teach it now. And so, yeah, I hope to be able to share some of my knowledge with you guys and provide some of the resources that I wish I had when I was starting to learn React. Yeah, so I'll hand it over to Eugene. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle. So my name's Eugene, and I'm the operations lead. So I'm the one that's mainly planning all the events and facilitating them. So my experience in React started during CalX 10 actually. So that was like last year. However, I felt like I honestly at that time I literally like self-taught myself throughout the hackathon. So it wasn't really fully React. However, I really wanted to be more involved in the hackathon scene. So I decided to self-teach myself React through Open Full Stack. So yeah. But I feel like if you guys really want to get involved in hackathons, then you should definitely learn JavaScript because a lot of the stuff in hackathons require you to present like a website and having something interactable is the best way to, roll for the judges. But yeah, let's take it away, Kyle.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for that, Eugene. Okay, so now you want to take it away with a sort of overview, a background behind what JavaScript is, and kind of explain what this is. Oh, did you?
Oh, I thought you wanted to explain it. Oh, no, I can
Okay,
explain it. So basically,
sure, go ahead.
JavaScript is a language for the web, and it actually adds the interactability for your websites. So if you ever like hovered over a YouTube video and the video starts playing, that's all JavaScript. And if you ever press the navigation button and it opens, that's JavaScript. And it's basically, like I said, the fundamentals of the web, and basically every site nowadays use JavaScript. And we can see here like here are the three layers of web development. It's going to be CSS, which is your presentational layer. Your content and structure is known as HTML, and JavaScript, which is known as the behavior and logical side of your application. Let's go down. So I guess when the web was becoming more popular, people decided, let's add JavaScript for that interactability. And one of the best use cases is known is for web development, and you may know you already know that already. However, there's other stuff like Node.js, which is a server runtime environment, and a lot of people use something called Express.js, and it's just basically it's like a way to make APIs and authentication and all that stuff from scratch. Another Another thing you can use JavaScript for is games. So 3JS, Melon.js, and Phaser are all well-known libraries for game development. You can add that for particularly for 3JS, I can't vouch for the other two. You can add 3D elements to your website and it'll which you can't do with base JavaScript. So it adds that extra dimensionality to your website, which is pretty cool. Desktop apps. So a lot of people use Electron. So Electron allows you to create a desktop app using your website. So already you might not even know, but a lot of applications like Discord and VS Code, I think Postman use Electron. So instead of having to deal with multiple code bases and multiple code bases for particular systems like Mac, Windows, Linux, you can have everything one code base and your website. Pretty simple. Crypto mining. I've never even heard anyone doing crypto mining using JavaScript, but I guess you can do crypto mining.
Hey, yeah, if you want to be evil, man, just put together a crypto mining, make some money on the side for your websites. But you didn't hear that from me.
All right, then let's go to
Okay,
the
cool.
next one. All right, can you go back up? Uh,
This
I
is the
think,
top right here.
oh yeah, I might look at, oh, okay, yeah, I see it. I think
Yeah,
it's not synced up.
odd.
Yeah, okay. So you may know what a variable is, right? It just stores a value, but we're going to look at the syntax. So basically in JavaScript, there's something called let and const, and let is just a normal variable. It's simple as that. And const is just constant. So you can't change the variable after initialization. But you may have noticed that there's also something called var. We never use var in JavaScript, and there's a reason why, because there's no concept of scope. So you can see in the example here, right? You initialize var in this block of code, but you print I, it will still print it out. That's because it doesn't get destroyed after that block. Other than that, you just don't use I mean you just don't want to, like to build up any more errors and it can accumulate and like it just gets messy. Just don't use global variables. But yeah, just use constant let. Let's go to next slide. All right. So you may already know what a variable, an array is. It's just basically a list of elements. So t dot push 5 just adds 5 to the original element or to the original variable. But you may notice that it doesn't lead to an error even if t is constant. Well, the reason why is because you're not actually changing the object of the array. You're changing the content of you're changing the content in the object of the array. It's basically you're not if you were to just add like just it would lead to an error if you did t equals a new array, but you're not doing that. You're just adding 5 to it. It's just changing the content. And you may know that it's pretty obvious, but like dot length is it just prints the length of the array, and then to get the element of a certain index, you just use the simple notation that you use in Python and C++. So it's pretty easy. Another thing is the for each loop, and the thing is for each, right? It would pass individual elements or pass the individual elements for each I'll pass the elements in the parameter in the argument. So for example, one gets passed into value and then value gets printed and then -1 gets passed into value and that gets printed as -1. It's just a simple for each loop if you guys are familiar with programming in Python or C++. Let's go down. And you may notice okay. So another thing is concatenate. So concatenate is similar to push, but instead of adding the element to the new array, you're actually creating an array with the element. So T doesn't get modified. Uh, it actually just creates T2, or it just actually creates the new element in T2. So basically, for T, you just have the same variable or same array. However, for T2, you just have that same array, but with 5. So it just adds just creates that new array. All right, let's talk about map. So map does pretty much the same thing. It does a very similar thing to for each, where it passes the elements in the of each single element in that parameter or in that argument. However, it creates a new array with that change. So for example, it will pass in 1 into value, and 1 times 2, or the value times 2 is 2, and for all the values it's multiplied by 2. So I'll just have the new array with those changes. All right, this is a concept that's pretty confusing at first, but I'll explain it. So let's say that you want to get the second element, or first and second elements only of the array. So through destructuring, you can get the first and second element by having an array as a variable and doing like first, second, and then the dot operator, which is the one with rest, will actually just get the rest of the element that you did not choose from the first two. So initial at the end, you get second first, and that would be print as 1, 2, and then you get the array of elements that you do not want, or the rest of the elements. That's why. Um, yeah. Let's go to the next one. So in JavaScript, there's actually two ways to initialize an array. So the first one is you put function sum, which is the typical normal way of initializing, not an array, a function, a way to initialize a function. However, you can do it through arrow function. So it's essentially essentially you can do const sum and then just have the parameter p1, p2, and then do the arrow symbol. And the way you call it is basically the same way you would call it as a normal function. And if you go down, you can see here we're cutting corners. So instead of having to use having to use parentheses, you can do it without the parentheses. However, it would only work if you have one parameter. So if you have two, you have to use the parentheses. And yeah, we can even shorten this down by even one line. So if you want, so basically this would just return the squared version of p. And we can even shorten this by putting it in a dot map function. So I remember how I said that each individual element of the array gets passed as a parameter in in this function. Well, that's basically what's happening. So it's going to return the value as, you know, 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 2, and then, or not 2, 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 3 is 9. Basically, it's just a function in the dot map operator. And um, basically, yeah. And basically it just creates that new element, or uh basically it just creates that new array with those changes. All right.
I'm going to move to the next slide.
Yeah, go to the next slide.
All right.
So basically this is objects. So objects are actually really similar to Python dictionaries. Just key pair values. So for example, object1.name would just be Artos Hellas, which is the name of the object for object one. And then you can do it even like the bracket notation, even like Python. So object one age is going to be 35. So is this really similar to Python? If you ever dealt with Python dictionaries, pretty much the same concept. You just deal with it like that. And yeah, the next part is going to be Kyle is going to be talking about the React side of things and how all of this is basically the knowledge you need for creating a simple React application. So I'll take it away,
Okay,
Kyle.
great. Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to get into, now that we have a sort of basic understanding of the core JavaScript sort of concepts and sort of how it separates itself as a unique coding language, now we can get a little bit into what React.js is. And what React.js is, it's an open source JavaScript library that is developed by Facebook for building websites. And well, why was it created? What's the problem that it solves? Why can't we just use regular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Well, maintaining hundreds of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript pages kind of sucks. It's a lot of copy pasting and a lot of repeated code, and it's just not a great developer experience. And so React was built to take a new approach in web development and improve the developer experience to just make things scale better, and you have less of a headache when you're working with hundreds of files. And what Facebook did, clearly it works. It works and people like it. And we can sell this from, this is, I think, the Stack Overflow survey for the web framework that developers use, and this was 2021. And React is beating out everyone. Over 40, I think 40% of developers use React.js. And I think this was out of, yeah, 67,000 people who responded to this survey. So clearly it's pretty popular. So now you might be asking, well, why doesn't everyone use this? Because not every website actually uses React.js. It's a really popular framework, but it hasn't exactly taken the web by storm. Okay. And just like any tool, React.js is going to have its pros and cons. The pros, as I mentioned before, is that it's a better developer experience over vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it's faster and easier to develop complex applications because it scales very well with large databases. And this is thanks to the virtual DOM that React maintains. So that means only the components that change or update get re-rendered. So it stays very efficient even with hundreds of elements on the page at once. But the cons, as you might imagine, it's going to be slightly slower. It's because of the processing overhead with the virtual DOM as opposed to just raw JavaScript code. And it's going to require more bandwidth from the client because the client has to download more JavaScript from the server. And it's going to be more complicated because there's more things that React.js is going to abstract away. You don't understand everything that's actually going to happen. There's also extra setup. React.js does not work out of the box. And so it might be harder for a beginner to actually try out React.js. And there's lots of complex concepts. There's a lot of gotchas, and some things are not that intuitive when it comes to React.js. There's also lots of different tools that solve really like random problems and have like the most abstract library names. And so, yeah, that's definitely something you got to learn. And as I mentioned before, it's going to be a higher learning curve compared to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is going to be just way easier to pick up for a beginner. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work right out of the box. In fact, you don't even need anything special to just start writing code. But as compared to React.js, you're going to have to set up a whole environment. But you guys are here. You guys don't care about the pros and cons. You just want to learn something new. So I just mentioned this just so you guys kind of have a good idea of what React.js is good for. So let's get into actually initializing a React project. I might go a little fast. I don't really expect you guys to follow along, but I'm going to go over it in case you guys want to go back on these slides and
I have
follow
meeting.
this.
You got to take him.
Yep. And so some of the prerequisites you're going to need is Node.js. It's an executable you install on your computer. And what this does is gives you access to NPM packages and lets you download NPM packages, and this includes React and its several other frameworks and other libraries that are going to work with React. Okay, this is required. Without this, React.js will not work. And so another prerequisite I recommend you guys to have is VS Code. This is a lightweight IDE and is used to edit code in the project. It can be used with any language, but it's especially good with React projects. And you'll see when I actually demo React, there's a lot of extra features there that just make your life a lot better. But in reality, you could really use any text editor you want. You could use Notepad if you really hated yourself. But yeah, anything works as long as it edits text. Okay, and so let's get into frameworks. Well, what are frameworks? Well, a framework is a collection of pre-installed tools and JavaScript code to make the setup process easier. As I mentioned before, React.js does not work out of the box. You're going to need a framework in order to set the entire environment up. And the one that I recommend you guys use is going to be Vite. If you're just starting out and you want an all-in-one React environment, this is very easy to set up. You just run, I think, like something npm install, like Vite or whatever. And yeah, it works really well. There is an alternative framework called Create React App out there that I was using when I was learning React. But I want you guys to avoid that because it's old and unmaintained. But Vite is new, currently maintained. I recommend you guys use this. And for those of you who are looking for a little bit more, some more features, I would recommend Next.js, but not necessarily to a beginner because it comes with a lot of extra bloat that you might not be able to take advantage of. But if you need a server and a website, I'd recommend going with Next.js. But if you're just a beginner, I would recommend Vite if you just want to play with React. Okay? And so now that we have got an environment set up, you guys kind of have an idea of how to do that. I want to get into the basics of React. And this portion of the guide is going to be based on React's own tutorial, kind of condensed, and I picked out the parts that I want to actually focus on that actually make sense. And so let's just get started. All right, so I have a environment here set up. I have Vite running in VS Code right here. And I have the actual website running in the top right. And so if I change anything here, guys, it's going to change here. Okay. Hopefully this layout will make it easier to understand sort of what I'm doing as I walk through the code here. Okay. So let's start with the fundamental idea, the fundamental language of React. I put it in quotes because it's not really a language. What it actually is, it stands for JavaScript XML. It's a syntax extension for JavaScript, and it allows the developer to write HTML-like code within their JavaScript files. And this is going to be necessary because of how React works. Everything is written in JavaScript, and so that means you're going to need some way to manipulate the HTML within JavaScript itself. And JSX was created for that purpose. And so as you can see here, Eugene was talking earlier about variables. What in regular JavaScript, you cannot do this. You cannot set a variable to some HTML code. JSX lets you do this, and you're going to see why this is important once I jump into the next concept, which is going to be components. Okay, so components, a component, it's a piece of the user interface that has its own logic and appearance. It can be as small as a button or as large as the entire page. So they can really be whatever you want, and they can display whatever HTML you want. And they are the fundamental building blocks of React. Every React website is going to be built on components, and every component must return JSX. This is the really nice thing about React, and you're going to see why in just a second. So let's try out this component. As you might notice, it looks like a regular JavaScript function, and that's intentional. But instead of a regular JavaScript function, where it would return some kind of value, it returns JSX. And it's going to return this button HTML tag here. And we can use this component by putting it between these, I don't know what these are called, but these greater than, less than sign, and calling my button. And if we save it, we can see that the button gets rendered to the website itself. And that's because that's exactly what we defined it here. It returns HTML. And the really nice thing about these components is that they're reusable. So I could copy these components over and over again, and I can just reuse them. And if I change something here, it's going to change all of them. And that's just a really nice feature because it makes your code reusable and easier to maintain. Okay, so now let's mix some JavaScript into it. I want to display some data. JavaScript objects can be displayed in JSX using curly braces and accessing the object like you would normally do in JavaScript. So here, in this example, I have just a regular JavaScript object. Let's delete all this. And I want to access the data within this object. Well, intuitively, you might think, oh, I can just type user because that's the name of the object, and I can access the key value, which is going to be .name. But it doesn't work. And that's because React does not see this as, does not understand that you're trying to access a JavaScript object. It's treating it like regular HTML. So you can tell React to treat this like JavaScript by putting it within these curly braces. And you'll see, once I save this, we access the value correctly. And on the user object, right here, we access the key name, and the value gets displayed, Kyle. Okay? Nice. And this goes beyond just displaying data. What if we have an image tag like so? I'm gonna make this a little small. This is an image tag in HTML. You provide it within this source attribute, the URL you want the image to display. And here I have an image URL already pre-set up. And I want to pass in this value into the source, but I can't just type user.name. It's not going to work. See, VS Code gets really mad at me. So I can tell React I want to pass this in like a JavaScript object by using, again, the same concept, the curly braces. And then now React knows that I'm trying to treat this like a JavaScript object. So I can do user.name. Whoops, not user.name, user.image URL. And boom, there we go. You got a picture of me. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of how you would display JavaScript data like that. And you're probably asking yourself, okay, you can display these regular variables. How are you going to display arrays? And that's what I'm going to get into next. So to display lists, in order to display a list of components, we have to turn them into JSX. We have to build them with features like the for loop or the map that Eugene mentioned before. And so given we have this array of products. Okay, well, just like last time, why don't we try to access this object and try to display it like we did with the object up here? We open it up with curly braces and pass it in and tell React, okay, I want to display this list, but it's not going to work, as you can see here. React has no idea how to interpret this square brackets. And so we have to compile it into JSX. And we can do that with this code here. We map over the products array, which is basically just like an inline for loop, I don't know. And we build the HTML. So for each element within this products array, we create an HTML element that accesses the title for each object. And what this returns is an array of JSX elements. And you'll see once I actually pass this in, that React will understand what I'm talking about. It doesn't understand JavaScript code, but it does understand HTML. All right. And so that's what I mean when you have to compile it into HTML. All right. And so now let me get into another fundamental idea behind behind JavaScript and React in general. So say we have a button, all right? This button from before. I'm gonna bring this in here. My button, all right? And when I click it, it doesn't do anything. And how do we actually hook that event to do something when I click this button? Well, when I click, it's considered an event. And we can respond to events in the browser by creating an event handler function and passing it to that attribute inside of the HTML element itself. So here, what I mean by that, you're going to see in a second. I create that event handler function. It's just a regular JavaScript function. I get it. It sounds fancy, but it's really not. And you can pass it into the onClick attribute here. And this onClick attribute is a special attribute that is provided by React so that we can actually pass in JavaScript objects. And in this case, the JavaScript object it's expecting is a function. And that's what we defined here. Okay, nice. I don't know why it's not
I think you
rendering. That's
forgot to put the return statement on it.
Oh yeah, thanks, Eugene. You can tell Eugene is much better at this. Thank you for that, Eugene. Nice. All right. And so now we have it actually rendering. And so now if I click it, this onClick function will be called by React and the alert will be called. So I click it and the alert pops up. So yeah, not too bad. Pretty simple, hopefully. And that's how you handle events in the browser. There are many more events, but it's just too many for me to actually go over in this presentation. So as you come up on them, like on submit, on click, other things like that, I recommend you just look it up. It's not too bad. All right, so now let me get into maybe the most fundamental idea in React. And this is the idea of state. So sometimes you want your components to remember some information and display it. And so I'm gonna go ahead and try the naive way of defining state within the component. So the way you might think, because it's a function, well, if I wanted state, I could just define a variable like count within the component itself. And that should count as state, right? The variable is there. And so if I increment it and display that value, sorry about that, my webcam fell. Nice. And so if I try to actually display this value count, it should update, right? Well, I'm going to show you that it doesn't. I'm clicking right now, and the state isn't actually updated. And this is because of how React actually handles rendering components. React will only re-render a component if it's told to. And if I just call this function, React has no idea that I'm trying to update this component and try to draw something new. The value gets updated here, count plus plus. Every time I click it, it will increment. But what is shown on the component itself never gets updated because we never tell React to do that. And so what we have to use is a special function called useState. And this is a hook that React gives us to manage variables like this. All right. So let's try it out. We have to import this function from React itself. And so instead of having this let count variable, we're going to initialize the state, right? And instead of this count plus plus, we're going to use this special function that React gives us. It doesn't have to be called set count. You could just set this to whatever, but we're going to call set count, which is the special function that React gives us to set the state. And so now, once you see that I click it, it actually does update. And this is because the special function that React gives us will tell React to re-render the component. And that's why we can see the value actually update. Okay? And the interesting thing about state is that if you keep it within the components, each component will have its own instance of state. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I initialize some more buttons, you'll realize that they each keep their own state. And that's because they're all within this button component. And that's how we can have multiple different buttons with different values. And they all keep track of their own value because of the idea of state. All right. So hopefully you guys can see why you can't do it like this. It's one of React's really gotchas you just kind of have to deal with. So yeah. All right. And so now I'm going to get into, I think this is the last fundamental idea that I wanted to go over in terms of React. So I'm going to go over the idea of properties and sharing data between components. So imagine I want two buttons that share the same state. Well, how do I do that? If I try to click it, they maintain their own state. But what we can do is we can do what's called lifting the state into the parent component. So we have our component, my button, and we want to lift the state to the parent component. Well, what's the parent component? It's going to be the component that actually calls my button, and that's going to be app. App is the parent component. And so what we want to do is move the state up into the app component and pass that state down to the buttons. So instead of having a my button here, having it keep track of its own state, we're going to pass in the state through what is called the component properties. And that is what is passed into the parameters here. This is called the component properties, what I have highlighted right here. So we have, again, the count and onClick functions that we're going to pass in to this component. And we're going to define them right here. We're going to copy paste this over. Okay, there we go. So now we have lifted the state to the parent component. Instead of having it on my button, we now have it in the app component. And so anytime we click, we're going to increment the count. And this value and handle click is going to be passed down to these button components. And they will use them just like you would the values you get from a parameter. And now, if I click it, they will update together. And this works because we share the state between all components. It doesn't matter how many buttons I have, they will all update at the same time with the same state, because it's all controlled in the parent component. All right, and I think that kind of concludes all of the major principles I wanted to cover with React. And since it's kind of impossible for me to actually cover, like, say maybe some of the more advanced topics, it's really hard also to grasp the idea of React and to really get down the idea of these concepts. And so I want you guys, if you want to learn more, to build a to-do list app. It covers all of React's unique concepts and is basically the hello world for JavaScript libraries. And there's tons of tutorials online. If one doesn't work out, just try another one. And I would recommend this for anyone who is looking to challenge themselves and try to learn React a little more. And some other things that I would recommend you explore is TypeScript. This is quickly becoming the standard within JavaScript. It hasn't totally taken over it. It's still sort of like a process. And what it does is adds types to JavaScript. So types you might be familiar with, like C++ and Java. You might notice during when I was trying to debug an error, I didn't even know I got an error, but TypeScript would have caught that for me. It catches bugs before they happen in runtime. It saves a ton of time. It's super nice. But there is, again, a bit of a learning curve to it. And so if you're interested, I would recommend to try initializing a framework, but instead of JavaScript, try initializing with TypeScript. And I will warn you, once you try TypeScript, it's very hard to go back. It saves just so much time. It's so nice. And yeah, one last thing, if you really, really do want to go down the web development route, you really enjoy what you want to do, you really enjoy web development, I would recommend you add a database and a server to it. And what this gets into is full stack development. You're not just touching the website, but you are actually implementing multiple parts of a fully functioning app. And this is very advanced. This will force you to delve into many different concepts and understand the web from many different perspectives. But if you're up for the challenge, you can really make a whole career out of this. Like, it's very complicated, but it's totally worth it. You can make some really, really cool things. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but these tools are just a suggestion. These are the ones that I've just been working with recently. Next.js, as I mentioned before, it provides a built-in API, like a server you can call from the client. There's also Supabase, which works directly with React, has official React bindings. It's a Postgres SQL database with user authentication. Firebase, if you're looking for a NoSQL database and user authentication. These are both really great developer experiences, and I highly recommend you check them out if you want to go down the full stack route. And I'm a little biased since I do enjoy full stack development. It's really worth it. I really enjoy it. So yeah,
I
these
think
are sort of the next steps.
I want to
Yeah,
recommend anyone who wants to join or do full stack development. So after like Cal Hacks, I was like, okay, how can I learn React the most efficient way? So I highly recommend this course. I'm gonna put it in the chat. It's called Full Stack Open. So it's hosted by a university. It's really they don't talk about React, but they also talk more on also Express.js and the other niches of JavaScript and and also like the particular libraries you would use for React JS, like Tanstack Query, React Router, if you want to make a multi-page application. So highly recommend this. They teach you so much through this one website. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Eugene, for that resource. I'll definitely look into it. I haven't actually never heard of it. Okay, and I think that concludes our talk. And so just a few announcements before I let you guys go. If you're not in GDSC Discord already, I really recommend you join. Eugene, if you can post the link for that. I don't know if I have access to it, but yeah. If you please join the GDSC Discord server to keep up to date with the latest news, what we're going to be doing next. There is also, oh wait, Eugene, hold on. I have it right here. There we go. Yeah, there's the Discord server link. And again, as I mentioned earlier before, maybe some of you just coming in now, GDSC is looking for new core members. So if you're interested in becoming a core member, which is like the officer position for this club, you'll be able to host things like this and kind of enrich the community here at CSU East Bay and the CS community here at CSU East Bay. And just, I don't know, it looks really good on your resume if you're looking for like experience, because it shows like, I think it's like community service, stuff like that. So it's really good. So yeah, I highly recommend you apply. I really enjoy this position, being able to kind of spread my knowledge to people who might be kind of struggling to, I don't know, get a little deeper into the world of CS. And
So
yeah.
I know I want to say, first of all, great job. Sorry
Thank
about
you,
the
Professor.
feedback. I got a meeting I'm hosting on the other end that I can't kill.
Of course.
I want to say really, really good job. And they're recruiting now because some people are graduating. So we're trying to recruit now for next year.
Yeah, I think like the club lead is going to be graduating. I'm going to be graduating as well. I believe our marketing lead has graduated, so a lot of roles are going to be open. The club lead position is going to be a slightly different application process. Vin, who is the club lead, should send more details about it soon. So if you're interested in that, I recommend you join the Discord and look out for that. And yeah, I think those are all of the announcements I wanted to make. So I just want to thank you guys for taking a good chunk of your evening tonight to come out and listen to us blabber for a little bit. Yeah, so we'll stick around in case you have questions, comments, feedback. And yeah, that's going to be it for our meeting tonight. I really thank you guys for coming out. Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Sophia.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you do recursion with React?
With
Thanks.
recursion with React. I actually don't know. I've never actually tried it. So, and I can't really see a use case where it actually be useful. So I never tried it. I don't know. You'll have to experiment with that on your own time. Amy. Yeah, Amy, we will, I don't know if you're still in the meeting, but we're recording the meeting. Oh, wait. Oh, Eugene, did you end the recording?
No, I'll end
Okay.